Welcome to Stars Matter in the Until Saturday feed. This episode of Stars Matter is sponsored by Invesco QQQ, the official ETF of the NCAA. I'm Mitch Light, joined. Usually we try to have these clever introductions. We say hello, let our guests say hello, but we have way too much to get to on the first day of the early signing period, joined by Ari Wasserman, Grace Raynor, and Manny Navarro. And Manny, our Miami beat writer, covers recruiting for us in the Southeast, mainly Florida. We got to get to you first. You had a eventful day. First with Jeremiah Smith. You thought you saw Jeremiah Smith signing to Ohio State. Later, you saw an Armando Blount flip from Florida State to Miami. As we're talking live right now, Jeremiah Smith has still not signed his national letter of intent. Tell us what you know at this point, and I guess you've had sort of an eventful day.
Yeah, I think I probably should have listened to Ari and just opened up the black bag to see if there was an actual national letter of intent in there and not just a Miami hat and Ohio State hat, which that's what it turned out to be, according to Jeremiah. I can tell you at this hour, as we're here live streaming, that his national letter of intent, I think, is still not arrived at Ohio State. I think they're still working out some P's and Q's in the contract, right? His NIL deal. And I think if Ohio State meets what he wants, he'll end up signing with the Buckeyes and sending that national letter of intent over. I think if that doesn't happen, I think there's probably a really good chance he'll end up at Miami. So it's the world of college football we live in now, Mitch.
Where do you think he wants? I mean, this is probably too difficult. Where do you think he wants to play? Do you think he's literally torn, or you think he wants to go to Ohio State, but there's family, there's other things pulling at him?
Yeah, I think from a football perspective, he feels like, Ohio State's the best place for him to go. He told me flatly, I want to go to a place that develops guys into first round picks. And so he sees that as the best place to go. He believes in the Ari Wasserman philosophy. You go to the place.
Yeah, because there's no way he'd be a first round pick if he went to Miami.
Not tonight, Mitch.
We're not doing that tonight. Okay.
But I'm just saying, like, in general, he really does feel like Brian Hartline is the best receivers coach in the country, and this is the place for him to go. And I also think on the flip side of it, he also knows that if he stays home, his grandmother will get to watch him every single game, right? Like, she won't have to get on a plane to fly up to Columbus. His mom will be there. His dad will be there. He also knows that he's got a bunch of friends that he grew up playing youth football with the Miami Gardens Ravens. They're all signed with Miami. A bunch of them signed with Miami. So he has a chance to stay home and quote unquote be a part of something special. And I think ultimately, though, this is an NIL type of thing. And I think if Ohio State can't sort of guarantee some of the things that he wants, he'll probably stay home.
Ari, you have covered recruiting for a while. You've covered Ohio State for a long time. Just balls in your court. What are you thinking right now?
I understand that he has been one of the most famous recruits of the last 2 years. I mean, anybody who's watched his tape knows that he is a
most notable non-quarterback, right? Would you guys say notable non-quarterback
he's
the last 3 or 4 years?
Transcendent athlete who I think would be a first-round pick no matter where he went.
Thank you.
That said, I also, and everybody else probably to a certain extent, forgets he's a kid. And we're talking about, people pulling on both arms behind the scenes. He has to make a decision that's best for him, and the hope is that he gets to do that. But I also understand, too, that if Miami is going to be offering something more financially than Ohio State, and he gets to do those things that Manny just said about playing in front of his grandparents and playing with his kids that he grew up with and, staying close to home, like that makes a lot of sense to me. If he wants to go to the place that has pictures of Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, and Marvin Harrison standing next to each other, then he goes to Ohio State, and I know it might be a little bit deeper than that, but there are two different ways to chase a bag, and it's not that he's not going to get paid at Ohio State either. I'm not crazy enough to think that. So I guess it just comes down to, not just for Jeremiah, but for anybody that's in this position of, do you want the upfront situation where you can still, take all that money and achieve what you want? Because who's to say that with the class that Miami just put together today that they're not going to be very good in the next few years? Or he can go to the place or the path with least resistance that has, made these first-round draft picks year over year under Brian Hartline and go a little bit further away from home. So it's a shame that this isn't set already, because I don't want the podcast to be out of date for some of the people who listen to this tomorrow. But, for the number one player in the country to still be in this position to say he's going somewhere, and then maybe signing of the NLI with somebody else 8-10 hours later is just another signing day grab ass situation that is what makes this day special. And honestly speaking, as we get through into more signing day discussion, there really wasn't anything crazy that happened. I mean, last year we had a kid not date the form properly, and that caused him to flip somewhere else. Like, flipping isn't crazy. It's the craziness that happens outside of that didn't happen today. And if this happened, then he went to Miami. I think that would qualify for sure.
Yeah, there are some notable flips we'll get to. Jordan Seaton, the number 1 offensive tackle, is not signed and will not sign today, despite going on TV and publicly committing to Colorado a few weeks ago. But Grace Raynor, you like some drama.
I do.
You do like drama, and as someone who's not specifically covering this, you're just sitting sitting back enjoying. What are your thoughts on this saga?
I mean, as a human being, I feel for Jeremiah, right? Because he's a kid and there's a lot of pressure and a lot of people in his ear. But as a consumer of content, I love the grab ass. Like Brian Day today almost fainting when he found out that Jeremiah had committed, but then he couldn't say anything.
And at that point, is that what he was doing? Get ahead of myself. Ahead of us. They had not gotten the Edric Houston news either. There was a lot of smoke to Edric Houston. So he got up in that press conference. He didn't know about Jeremiah Smith. He probably thought that Edric Houston was going to Alabama. Ari, you tweeted some stuff about
Ohio State takes.
As you want to do. Like it's either going to be the worst day or the best day of Ryan Day's life. So Grace, that had to play into it when we watched Ryan Day like that. He was pretty stressed out.
Yeah, well, and now you see Manny's tweets about Jeremiah not knowing until 2 minutes before, and it's like I think it's a reminder, and we always knew this, but just to see how high the stakes are playing out in real time, I think is really fascinating, and I can't wait. Hopefully, one of us writes it, like the story of the 8 hours or the 10 hours or however long this goes between Jeremiah's gymnasium announcement and putting his name on a piece of paper.
Manny, I think I'm your editor, but I think Grace just assigned a story to you. So
I want to read that so bad. Like, what the heck has happened this afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, he's giving interviews to people like Manny about Ohio State.
Yes.
And I mean, we have not been in that position. We need to move on, but it's just like, it seems like it's a very difficult decision, but like once you make that decision, it should be made. But then
Mitch, I know that you're the host of the show, but maybe this will be a nice segue just to talk about everything else that Miami did today, because there was a lot.
Well, I was going to say real quick before we get to Miami, what was it? Jeremiah McClellan, the four-star wide receiver.
Pick Ohio State, 30 seconds?
Yeah, do 30 seconds on Ohio State, then we'll let Manny jump in on Miami.
Ohio State's day started off rough because Jeremiah McClellan flipped to Oregon. He's a top 100 player and a receiver, and as you guys know, Ohio State doesn't lose those players very often under Brian Hartline and has signed a lot of them. But there was a notion coming into the day that Jeremiah Smith would sign at Ohio State and that Edric Houston would flip to Alabama. And Edric Houston is a 5-star defensive end. And anybody who's been paying attention to Ohio State the last few years knows that receiver and having those types of players in that position room isn't much of a need. Not that Jeremiah Smith.
Luxury. Yeah.
I mean, Jeremiah Smith is a take for everybody, no matter what, because he's a brilliant player. But they haven't been recruiting very well on the defensive line to the point where it's like numbers are an issue. So to lose a 5-star defensive end after losing 5-star defensive tackle Justin Scott to Miami of all places, a month ago, they would have gone into a situation where I think they only signed like 5 or 4 tackles the last 2 years, and
you're talking more tackles,
or 2
because they signed
ends.
2 5-star, Jack Sawyer and JTT, who are going.
I mean, Jack Sawyer's been in college, might leave for the NFL this year. Like they are dire straits when it comes to edge rushers, and I think they're going to have to explore the portal. But they've gotten to a position where people are questioning Larry Johnson's future, whether it's time for him to retire, whether or not Ohio State can get it done on that side of the ball, especially at that position group. So losing out on a kid that's been committed for months who didn't visit anywhere until, the end of the road here, and then they end up losing him would be a real kick in the knackers, as the kids like to say. And the fact that they were able
kids
to
say knackers, by the way.
The fact they were able to hold on to him is a huge situation. And as Jeremiah Smith is still in the fold as well, Ohio State's the only program in the sport this year who has commitments from 5-star prospects. Now, that could change, as recently or as soon as a minute from now. But there's no question that the addition or the lack of loss of Edric Houston out of this classes might might be one of the most important storylines in recruiting for Ohio State of the last 2 years. Now they got to find a quarterback. They might not. They might roll with, Aaron Noland, who also signed the 5-star, kid that signed today. But yeah, I mean, it was going to be if they would have lost Edric Houston, it would have been like banana land in Columbus, Ohio, Twitter today.
All right, Manny. Armando Blount reflipped.
Mm-hmm.
He's a kid who reclassified from 25 to 24, committed to Miami, flipped to Florida State when he announced his reclassification. Now he's back. You were at his ceremony. That was not a secret. You'd been kind of telling us that to expect that. So just a great closing day. Even if they don't get Jeremiah Smith, just a great day for Mario.
Yeah, I mean,
run it down. Like, what do they get for people who are like watching this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, obviously Blount is a 5-star defensive lineman, edge rusher, 6'4", 250. It's crazy, but when he starts classes in January at Miami, you mentioned him reclassifying. He's going to be 16 years old. He doesn't turn 17 until February.
A lot of guys who reclassify are already of age, and they're like,
right.
They would have been 19 as freshmen, but he sounds like he's a true
skipping
a grade.
He is, and he's 6'4".
My brother did that, just so you know.
All right. 3
stars. He's just smart. He was just smart.
Okay.
He just went to college early and got addicted to cigarettes.
Between him and Justin Scott. between Blount and Justin Scott.
Manny's just going to keep going. Benji recruits names.
He said we had to get through this. Quickly.
All right, sorry.
Between Blount and Scott, you have two of the best defensive linemen that Miami, I think, signed like in the modern era. So, I mean, obviously Mario set out to do that. They hosted a bunch of kids over the summer. And these are the two guys they ended up with. They also got Marquise Lightfoot, who's a top 100 edge rusher. So 3 of their top 4 signees are defensive linemen. The other one's
from
safety.
Chicago. 2 from Chicago. Pipeline.
Marquise, two kids out of Chicago, right? And Miami, people forget, but they've actually recruited some really good players out of the Chicago area back in the day. Zaquan Patterson is, a kid that they flipped from Florida State, or didn't flip, but looked like he was trending towards Florida State. Today they flipped to Darius Hayes, a 4-star linebacker who was committed to Florida. And then Jordan Lyle, they got the running back on Monday night from St. Thomas Aquinas locally, a big-time star at St. Thomas.
Lost Kevin Riley, the running back.
Yeah, they lost Kevin Riley, but it was sort of a preemptive move.
Trade,
getting Lyle, right? Because
it is kind of funny to me that Miami is just picking on Ohio State this year.
Yeah, I mean, three dudes basically out of their class here down the stretch, and potentially, potentially 3 dudes with Smith. So
okay, we've got
3 important dudes.
Yeah,
we've got a segment coming up more on the Florida schools. We're going to talk Florida State, but Ari, I think this is a good time for Manny to admit defeat. Florida State, they're closer to number 10 than they are to number 1. And for any new listeners tonight, Manny, about 3 or 4 months ago, made a bold prediction that Florida State was going to end up with the number 1 class in the country, and kind of dug his heels in, even wore Florida State gear, around town, just trying to get the kids that signed with the Seminoles. And there's a glimmer of hope for a while, but Manny, it's over.
Yeah, I think they got to as high as number 3, Mitch. Maybe getting really close to number 2 there with Ohio State for a while. But today was a bad day for them. You mentioned KJ. I think one of you mentioned KJ Bolden earlier, didn't you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Another 5-star flipped. Yeah.
They lost 2 5-star prospects today.
Yeah, they lost both of them, both of their 5 stars. The only 2 that they had. So it was a rough day for Mike Norvell. And it's kind of been a crappy couple weeks, right, since they missed the playoff. And then today is just kind of like, I don't want to call it the cherry on top, but certainly like just deflating for them. Look, I will say this is their first top 10 class since I think 2017. So at least there's a step forward there. They've kind of relied so heavily on the transfer portal. They still got some really good defensive backs in this class, including Charles Lester, who's I think one of the top cornerbacks.
But also had like a weird morning because he sent in his national letter of intent. And then said, I'm not signing today. And they already announced him.
Like,
so I don't know if there's anything weird going on there, but yeah.
So, but overall, I think, if you're a Seminole fan, I know you're not feeling good today, but I would tell you just don't freak out. It's not the end of the world. I think Mike Norvell's still doing a pretty good job over there.
Yeah, and there was a little Ryan Wingo talk this morning, although Ryan Wingo's sleeping. and everyone's talking about him.
That was the best tweet of the whole day.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, for the if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably on social media and you probably saw this, but there was maybe some people insinuating that Ryan Wingo could be flipping from Texas and all this stuff. And it's whoever tweeted said he's still sleeping. Like an hour later, Wingo's like, I'm up, I'm awake, or something like that. And he signed with Texas. Yeah,
like that kid's gonna be a stud because like if you are so sure of yourself,
you got a sense of humor
on the biggest day of your young life, with the entire internet hanging on to your decision, you're just like hitting the snooze button. Like, you imagine like the night before a job interview or any big day that you guys have in your life, like you're like locked in. You know, you wake up earlier before the alarm.
I was up at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning on Saturday. Yeah, I was ready.
You're afraid that you're going to miss something, and then this kid's just like one leg hanging off the end of the bed,
so
just like snoring.
Yeah. So he when he picked Texas, it was over Missouri. Other schools were involved, and that could have given Missouri 2 5-stars. South Carolina has 2 5-star. And Ari, this is something you're actually writing about tonight, and we've talked about, and it's been written about how
I'm getting tired.
Yeah, in the NIL era, how might be some more teams getting in that 5-star, a little more talent spread out a little bit, and we had Shane Beamer on. We have clips from 3 coaches that we talked to this week for part of our show. We talked to Shane Beamer just kind of about his program. He signed 2 5-star players today. So we're going to listen to Shane Beamer in a second. For those of you watching on YouTube, here's a piece of our conversation with Coach Beamer. If you want to watch the full interview, it'll be up on the YouTube channel after our stream is over. And for those listening in podcast form, here's the full interview. Coach Shane Beamer. Hey, Coach, you've been obviously doing this a while and assistant coach for most of your career up until the last 3 or 4 years, I guess 3 years. How is this day different sitting in your chair now as a head coach than when you're an assistant? And sure, you wanted everything to go well for the program, but you had your guys you were honing in now. Now they're all your guys.
Yeah, just that. You're worried about, not worried, but you're so engaged and involved in every position. And, there's a lot of time invested into these young men. And before you were just worried about me as the tight ends coach or running backs coach or whatever it might be. Now it's not just all these guys that you've developed relationships with, but also understanding that getting them here into your program is a direct correlation between how successful you're going to be as a head coach and as a program. So it's the magnitude has increased, the time involved. I was coaching tight ends at Oklahoma and Georgia, and you'd go into signing day and you felt pretty good about the guys that you were recruiting, signing, and you were pretty relaxed and whatnot. Whereas the head coach, you're worried about the entire signing class and the signing day going the way you want it to.
Coach, you guys signed 2 5-stars this morning. Dylan Stewart out of Washington, D.C., defensive end, Josiah Thompson from Dillon, offensive tackle. I believe both of them are going to go down or as currently 2 of the top 10 highest rated recruits in South Carolina history. What was your pitch to both of them?
Both were unique just because of where they're from. Josiah being a in-state guy, he's somebody that 3 years ago when I got hired here at South Carolina, I was made aware of him pretty quickly. So we immediately started recruiting him. And along with Cam Pringle, another offensive tackle, and Blake Franks, another offensive tackle here from the state. But just with Josiah, great family, mom and dad are awesome, and just the opportunity here at Carolina to come here, and very similar to what I told Alshon Jeffrey and Stephon Gilmore and Jadeveon Clowney and those guys, DJ Swearinger back when I was here as an assistant coach, the opportunity to come and do something for your home state school and try and bring an SEC championship here. And then with Dylan, certainly the opportunity here. Sterling Lucas, his position coach, is fantastic, and opportunity to be coached by Sterling. But then the fact that we had so many guys from that Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland area that were already on our team, they were our best recruiters as well. They came here, they were freshmen this past season, or freshmen right now, and they've had a really good experience here in Columbia. And Dylan saw that, and they did a great job of helping us recruit him as well. But certainly to be able to get not just a 5-star from your state, but then to be able to get a 5-star. I think he's the highest rated prospect we've ever signed outside the state of South Carolina, which is huge, and excited about, Dylan being here.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into my next. You want to know my fun fact about Pringles when you were talking about Cam Pringle? Ari, I think I've told you this.
He's got the easiest NIL deal ever.
Yeah, he should.
Oh,
One of my friends was an engineer. His first job out of college was at the Pringles plant in Jackson, Tennessee. He was in the goal. Like, they evidently could not make them fast enough. because people ate too many Pringles. So they had to figure out from an engineering standpoint how to make Pringles faster. So every time I see Pringles, I think about that. So
Pringles are delicious.
Do you guys like them?
Yeah.
I haven't had them in a while.
I haven't either.
Are you a fan?
Throw in your bag snack.
You know, I want to hear a quick fun fact about your loved one.
Okay.
I like reduced fat chips better than regular chips.
Did you say a fun fact about your loved one?
Yeah. What?
I thought you were talking about my wife.
Do you mean yourself?
You are a loved one, but not
I didn't know that would be so confusing for you guys. Sorry about that.
I also thought you were talking about Heather.
You like low-fat chips better or fat-free?
Yeah, I like fat-free or
cardboard.
low-fat. They're less greasy. They're crunchier to me. I just have always liked them. And then Pringles used to have, my favorite trip was like either a fat-free or reduced fat Pringle that they stopped making once we found out that the low-fat thing was an entire scam. And I'm upset about it because it's like, well, it does make you have to go to the bathroom a lot.
All right. By the way, I didn't see who posted it, but one of our listeners asked Ari if you hear those footsteps from the top right corner.
I do.
Okay.
Okay.
Pitter patter, pitter patter.
All right. I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat because of it.
We got to talk about the number one class, Georgia Bulldogs. They win the recruiting crown. I think we called it, or 247 Sports, they called it about 1 o'clock, I guess, after KJ Bolden flipped.
It was a knockout.
Yeah, from drawing a blank in high school, Buford High School.
Yeah, Buford.
From Buford High School. 4 5-stars in the class, 15 players in the top 200, 10 top 100 players, in a very national class. And Grace, you and Seth Raynor published Seth Raynor. You're Grace Raynor. You and Seth Emerson published a story yesterday about the Georgia's not inability, but their lack of success recruiting their own state. But it still doesn't really matter because they signed the number one class. But it ended up, for a while they had zero. For a while they had one of the top 10 players in the state, Dylan Raiola.
He was number 10.
Even though he's not really in state. Then the rankings changed after Raiola flipped and they had the number 10 player. Now they have 2 of the top 10, but still it just doesn't really add up that Georgia can be so dominant in recruiting yet not sign so many in-state players. You talked to a couple coaches for that story. Kind of what was their angle?
It doesn't add up, but it also doesn't really matter right now. Like, you just can't knock what they're doing from a recruiting standpoint. And so you talk to high school coaches and they say, yeah, if they miss on a kid here, they're going to just go get someone else anywhere in the country. So, and then I think too, a big part of it is if you are a program who's trying to be serious, you are recruiting the state of Georgia. There's just so many kids there. It's such a fertile state for recruiting that I would argue that it's one of the most 3 competitive states with Florida and Texas in the country.
Yeah, I bet, Manny, this would be a good research project. We could ask Ari to do it, but it wouldn't turn out very well. We could look like how many Power 5 or the whole 133 programs, like over the last 5 years, like how many have signed ex-players from Georgia versus Texas. I think California is not part of that mix because geographically it just does not make sense for a lot of schools. But I'm guessing, you think there's a higher percentage of programs, I'll ask all 3 of you guys, higher percentage of the 133 programs that signed guys from Georgia or Texas?
Probably Texas just because of the size of the state.
Yeah, in the geography.
Yeah. But I did look up some numbers myself today,
right.
believe it or not.
So proud. I showed Ari how to use a Google spreadsheet today, and we got on a call, and I showed him how to sort. It was so fun.
I didn't get into this business to do math, but here we are. That it was only 2 of the top 15 players in the state of Georgia, not just top 10.
Yeah.
And each of the top 15 players in the state of Georgia are all top 115 players nationally. So it's not like they weren't recruiting kids at home that weren't ranked highly. Like they didn't right. close on players who are going to be difference makers in the classes that they signed. But then Georgia went out and signed top 100 players from the state of Florida, Texas, Virginia, Missouri, California, Georgia, Indiana, and Tennessee. For top 100 players, that is, only. They had other states that they got players that were outside of that. It literally was just pure domination from coast to coast when it comes to accumulating talent. I think what will be interesting, I guess, if Georgia hits rocky times, which based on their class being the only one that has 10 top 100 players in it, I don't think that's going to happen. But there is this notion that as it happened at Ohio State a little bit that I wonder if could happen elsewhere of when you start losing to your rivals or you start hitting rocky spots, if people go, we need people from the state of Georgia who understand the fabric of the place in order to take things more seriously when you start taking winning for granted. And I don't know that I buy into that notion, but it is an interesting thing of like, you can't criticize Georgia for not taking in-state players, But on the other hand, it's like if you are so easily able to go out and get a kid that's a top 100 player out of the state of Virginia or Missouri or California or Indiana, then why is it so seemingly hard to do it even if the kids aren't from Georgia with the ones that live in Atlanta? It's just a bizarre thing, and it's not good or bad. It's just one of the most unique recruiting stats that I think I've ever seen.
I think a lot of it. Go ahead, finish up.
I was just going to say, last year Alabama signed a class with 9 5-star players in it, and I don't know the numbers for that off the top of my head, but that was one of the deepest cycles of Alabama football at the prep level in the history of the state. So like, it's like there's usually a correlation between, picking up players in state and how highly you're ranked, especially considering the fact that when you get in-state players, they usually are able to get those commitments earlier, which then frees up your time to go out and branch out and get other players because time is currency in this whole thing. So it's bizarre. Georgia's dominant, but it is a bizarre stat.
I think one thing too is, we look at the rankings. We're not scouting all these players, but Georgia's in position. They get the best players they want, and they might like a linebacker who's ranked 140 more than a kid in Atlanta who's ranked 70. And Grace in that story talked about like Ladd McConkey. I think he's got to be one of the best evaluations ever. He's a 3-star. He's a great player. And I think Manny, you've covered Miami for a lot of times. I remember just reading some stuff. I think some previous staffs at Miami went star chasing, and they would sign kids based on rank. And Georgia's clearly not doing that. Now, these coaches, when there's a scoreboard, they want to have the number one class. I get it, all that, but you can't start chasing rankings. And I think some staffs at Miami have done that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think without question, I think a lot of times that happens, right? I think it's sort of the lazy approach, just go off the recruiting rankings and go after those guys based on that, and not necessarily do your homework. And obviously Georgia doesn't care about that. They've taken guys that are 3 stars and turned them into 5 stars by the time they're done with college. So kudos to that staff for just doing a great job. And I'll say this, Fran Brown, I thought when Fran Brown took the job at Syracuse, maybe they'd lose a little steam, right, with some of the guys in the secondary, and yet they added KJ Bolden, right, the number 1 safety after that, and then signed 4 top 100 recruits in the secondary. So kudos to them for that.
Yeah,
it's an important distinction to say because of the way that we were talking about it. Just because they didn't sign top 15 players in the state of Georgia outside of the 2 that they got doesn't mean that they wanted all of them. There were ones that they wanted, and there were ones that they didn't. So they picked and chose a little bit, but they did not want 13 of the 15.
Right. So a couple years ago, I asked you guys the question, or maybe it was just Ari before our family expanded to 4 people here. What Power 5 program had we mentioned the fewest times in the history of Stars Matter? Do you remember what that program was at that point, Ari?
Syracuse.
It was Colorado at that point. And I would say second is Syracuse, although we probably mentioned Syracuse in the regard that it's one of the toughest jobs because of its geography. But both you in a mailbag and Grace in her What I'm Hearing on the Recruiting Trail that published the other day talked about Syracuse. And I'm not saying Syracuse is going to sign top 30 classes coming up soon, but I don't think I've seen a program maybe since Colorado last year change its vibe so quickly. I mean, they're flipping kids. Kyle McCord's there. Let's not spend too much time on it, but Grace, you start first. You talk to one of their commits. I mean, Syracuse is on the map in recruiting because of Fran Brown. Yeah, totally. I think kids really resonate with him. He's super relatable. The Northeast is pumping out more talent, I think, than it has in the past. He's a New Jersey guy. I think that was an excellent New Jersey. I just think that was a really smart hire. And like you said, we just saw their entire identity change in the last 2 weeks. Yeah, Ari, it's kind of like it's an Ari Wasserman hire. Like, you got to do something different when you're Syracuse. So he's never been a coordinator. I don't know if he's been a head coach, like maybe in high school, but they went and they need talent. They got a guy who's going to give them talent.
I want to go to Syracuse. Can you put in the request for me?
Sure. I've been.
Have you ever been?
There's a Wegmans.
My first game as the sports editor of the Vanderbilt Hustler was Vanderbilt at Syracuse.
Did you go to Possibilities? It's the best restaurant in Syracuse.
Possibilities?
Oh my gosh,
that's so clever.
It's so good. I think about it
Grace has been there for some of Dabo's worst days, right?
I have.
How many losses did you see there? Just one?
Just one, yeah.
Okay.
At Possibilities?
No, in Syracuse.
In the
No
one's losing there. That place is great.
Yeah, everyone wins the Possibilities. That's what there should be their slogan.
I want you to request a travel request for me to go write a story about Fran Brown in Cuse.
You make your own travel request.
I want you to do it.
Yes, sir. All right. So we're going to read more about after Ari spends 2 weeks in bed with Fran Brown. So
You know it's going really hard over there at Miami because Manny's phone keeps ringing.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Stop,
Dude, you good, bro?
You're like Adam Schefter.
How many times does it have to ring before you like think to put it on silent? Like
I mean, I have it on silent. It's just, I keep
They're
having to press
notifying
the
you
side button.
anyway?
to stop
It
it.
rings. When
Yeah, I had
like,
keep sending it to voicemail. That's what I keep having to do here.
that's when you know it's legit when they say notify anyway.
yeah.
Yep.
So okay, Ari, you wrote a column this afternoon.
I sure
Posted
did.
it right away.
Not right away. We had a few hour layover, but we did.
Okay. On the Florida Gators, your boy Billy Napier. It
Yeah.
was a rough day for Billy. Why don't you take us through Florida's day? And it could have been a lot worse, a hell of a lot worse.
It could have been a hell of a lot worse. It was still really, really bad. I don't remember what the stats are off the top of my head. Let me pull the story up real quick. But they've basically lost 6 top 150 players in
Yes, it was
their
6.
class since
3 in November
11.
and like 3 recently, right?
Yeah. And the start of the day off with McCray, the 5-star defensive lineman, saying he wasn't going to sign. Now, ultimately, 5-star quarterback DJ Lagway and McCray both signed with Florida to kind of ease the blow a little bit. But before the afternoon, Lagway announced at like 3:30 Central, and McCray jumped into the fold around 6 o'clock Central. It was just an absolute bloodbath. And the problem with Florida here is, you know, they have a coach who was hired to be the anti-Dan Mullen. What does that mean? It means they had a coach that's supposed to come in and become a maniacal recruiter. He said at his introductory press conference that he was going to hire an army of recruiting staffers that did everything from on-campus recruiting experience to NIL to graphics to all the stuff that you need. They were going to really dive in and go head first into being great recruiters first, which is a coach that just gets it. You know, he just gets it. And that's why I bought into him for so long. And then today comes along and they go from having a top 3 class in the nation to being outside of the top 15 in seemingly, you know, a few weeks. And it's just like, now we're here looking at it and they have a few more top 100 players than Dan Mullen had in his final full class. But it's a Dan Mullen class, you know, and you're sitting here looking, and I know that Florida State had a bad day with some of the 5-star prospects that they had flipping out. But Miami's over here, you know, crushing it and, you know, signing all these top-level prospects and still are in the process of trying to convince Jeremiah Smith even to flip. And then, like, all of the juice has been sucked out of Florida's program. And it's like, I know that there are a lot of people who think that Billy Napier is going to be fired because they've been bad on the field and they've been bad in recruiting. And I actually don't feel like, you know, if I feel like somebody's not qualified for the job or that they're wrong for the job, I'm pretty vocal about that. I don't know that I feel that about Billy Napier, but it's very clear that
They didn't
something
look like
isn't
the most
adding up.
well-coached team on the field.
Sure, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
And I like get blinders on. If you're somebody who can recruit at a high level, I buy into that more than, okay, he called the fade route on 3rd and 1 when, you know, or whatever. But they're not doing that now either. Now they got Lagway, who's the quarterback, and he's the face of the class, and they got McCray. But like they were so close to just signing a top 5 class and just being like awesome going into the offseason and feeling good about themselves to like the wheels completely falling off at the worst possible moment with everybody watching and then them like limping over the sideline with 2 5-star prospects.
Do you think that McCray, like, because he said this morning, do you think they went like, dude, we really need you? Like if you know, we're having a bad day, we need Lagway to sign, stop screwing around, you know, who knows what happened, but he went from I'll sign on Friday to just boom on Instagram.
He did say stop screwing around, right? They're like, just stop screwing around and sign with us. That was their strategy.
Yeah,
It worked. They called his agent is what happened, and they said, we'll go ahead and meet your demands.
Okay, Manny with the real story there. So
yeah, you know, the thing that is just so difficult with me and all this stuff, it's like, okay, it's all like done in the darkness. And I think I even wrote this in the column, Mitch, like
something like chaos in the shadows.
The chaos in the shadows.
I read that. I was like, what the hell? I was like, I'll just keep it in.
Yeah, because you don't like, I'm just like, you beat me up today, and I'm just like tired. Okay. But it's like it's all happening, and it's all this fugazi, it's a fugazi, it's fairy dust. It does not exist. It's of no matter. It all comes together, but we don't know how it's made. We don't know what happened or if McRae got a $900,000 an hour, added into his contract. It's all bullshit. And some of it happens and some of it doesn't. But the fact of the matter is that while we're in a new era that isn't the same era that Dan Mullen coached in, we're still in an era where results are demanded. And in a world where one of the main topics of the Thoughts piece that I'm going to try to run tomorrow or the following day is some statistics about how much less lopsided the top 10 is. It's like you can't be a team that's not sitting at the table. 23 different teams signed at least one top 100 player in the 2021 class, which is the first full non-NIL class, or the last full non-NIL class. And in 2024, 25 have. So
have
even
you
though
given up on the
10,
phrase "the cool kids table"?
I don't know. It's the cool kids table. There's more. I don't know that there's more schools at the cool kids table, but the schools that have been sitting at the cool kids table have more equitable plates or more even plates with the other people who have been sitting there. You don't have 9 5-star prospect classes. You don't have a class that has 18 top 100 players in it like we got with A&M a few years ago. And Florida still is not in that mix. Now they've got 3 or 4, I think 4 top 100 players, and 2 of them are 5 stars, but like where they were and where they ended up, maybe if they just would have ended up here naturally, we wouldn't be talking about it, but it's where they were that got us here that makes it more painful, I think.
One of the first stories I edited from Ari was about Grace's alma mater getting a seat at the cool kids table. Grace, they had a good run.
Turned out to be wrong, yeah.
Yeah, they're like, nerd, go
Nerd.
over there. Yeah, so
you can't sit with us.
Grace, were you at the cool kids table in high school? Well, yeah, you were a star athlete.
Yeah, she was a star athlete.
No.
Or you,
Grace, were you
mean
to other people in high school?
Yeah, were you mean to your backup point guard?
No, I hope not. I don't think so.
But you went to an all-girls school. Is there more or less bullying in an all-girls
No, I didn't.
school?
I went to a co-ed school.
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, well, excuse me.
All right. We actually, the guy, if you would have said a week ago, who would we be spending 20 minutes in this podcast talking about, had the least amount of drama. Dylan Raiola had signed basically by the time we all woke up this morning, signed with Nebraska. So no drama there. We're going to talk about Colorado in a few minutes. And we're also going to talk about some new schools, moving conferences. But another coach we talked to was Jedd Fisch from Ari's alma mater, who they were recruiting with the cool kids a couple years ago, but now they're just kind of playing ball with the cool kids. And Ari, you might have referenced
what?
This. What
did you say about them being with the cool kids table? They weren't even in the school a few years ago.
No, I mean, the class, they
were homeschooled
class. Okay. They were allowed to school. But they're playing with the cool kids now. I mean,
they're in school now. Yeah, they get to go to school
could,
now.
They could be a preseason top team in the Big 12 next year. So here's our conversation with Jedd Fisch. And as saying before, this is going to be a part of it on this live stream. If you want to hear the entire conversation, it will be after the live stream. And if you're listening on the podcast form, here it is with Jedd Fisch. I know typically in recruiting, the fruits of a season's success probably aren't felt until the next year, in this case, class of 2025. But how much easier is it just when you're on the road talking to kids than when you've actually got tangible results rather than your first year when you're selling a vision?
Yeah, I think, I always said we had to have our team had to have confidence without evidence, and our staff had to have the same. That when they went on the road, they had to sell and tell and really give the messaging of who and what we are. Now, our first year, we didn't have a recruiting class. So we only were able to sign 2 players. That's all they had scholarship-wise when we arrived. So our first recruiting class was 22, which was probably the best class historically Arizona ever had. And then last year's class, we were able to build off of that. And then this year's class has been really a unique blend of we don't have a lot of numbers. We only have about 25 scholarships available, including the transfers, because all of our 22s, no one went in the portal. We didn't lose any players. So and we signed a big class the last 2 years.
Coach, when you arrived at Arizona, it was during a time in which it started to feel like, or people would feel like, that this is a program that you just can't win at for whatever reason. There was a class before you arrived that didn't have a single top 1,000 player in the rankings. I think there might have been one at the end when they did an update to those rankings. And it was just kind of one of those deals of like, what is wrong there? And then you show up and you just seem to get what Arizona was about immediately. You spoke their language and you understood the exact formula, the areas to recruit, the way to embrace it, bringing Gronkowski back for the spring, all the things that you did. As a first-year head coach, how do you learn that language, and how did you find yourself to be prepared enough to at least understand what needed to be done before it was done to fix Arizona's problems?
Yeah, even though I was a first-year head coach, I've been around a lot of head coaches, and I've been in 6 different programs, maybe even 7, in the first year of a program. So Pete Carroll's first year in Seattle, Jim Harbaugh's first year at Michigan, Gus Bradley's first year in Jacksonville. So when you start doing all the first years, you start realizing like, okay, what is it going to take? What does it look like? What do you need to do? And you look at where the successes came from, and you take those notes and you really just say, all right, we've got to ingratiate ourselves in the community. We've got to make sure that it doesn't matter what people thought of the hire. It doesn't matter that we didn't go to school here. If that was the case, then Nick Saban could only be the head coach at Kent State, right? And, Bill Belichick could only coach at Wesleyan. So we know that that's not true, but yet there's always that initial, stigma you got to get over. And our philosophy was we're going to hire a great staff that understands the West Coast and understands what it comes down to. And I felt like it was necessary to put guys like Ricky Hundley and Chuck Cecil on the coaching staff early, ingratiate and bring in Teddy Bruschi and Gronk to certain events, and really see like, okay, let's reach out to the past, but never, say that we're not going to move forward into the future.
How much do you anticipate? Guys, did you like my hard-hitting question? How much easier is it to recruit when you win games? You guys are all journalists, so you get to take some notes and you can learn from me. So after I asked that question, I was like,
you learned that at Hustler.
I said, what the hell's he supposed to say there? So, but the good talk with Jedd Fisch, smart guy, and a great little run there. Livingston, New Jersey native there.
It is kind of funny that we went from talking about Florida's struggles to Jedd Fisch, but
what are you trying to say?
That was completely on accident, guys.
What are you trying to say?
I'm trying to say that he would be a very prime candidate for that coaching job if it were to open.
Do you know where he went to college?
No.
He went to Florida.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he was not a football player. Just went, I think he was like a manager. So wanted to learn how to be a head coach. So interesting. So, all right, a Big 12 competitor of Arizona next year, seems weird to say, will be the University of Colorado. Interesting day when some of these schools are talking about 28 signees, 30 signees. Colorado signed 5 high school recruits. One of them was not Jordan Seaton, who midday, I guess there was some Maryland smoke there. He's a DC native.
Maryland smoke is like something you would see on The Wire.
A lot of smoke on that. So, okay, around the horn. Great, start with you. Where does Jordan Seaton sign?
I would say Maryland. I don't think he's going to Colorado. I don't know. Their class makes no sense to me. I think it was recruiting malpractice. I would not go there if I were him.
Let's go.
How do you sign 5? You and I can sign 5 players.
I know.
If I were as famous as Dion, I would have killed it.
I just can't. I just cannot wrap my head around that. I don't think he goes there. He would have signed by now, I think, if he was serious about going there.
Manny, where does he sign?
He told me he was going to stay on the East Coast when I talked to him in August.
Manny's he's going to sign at Miami. Yeah.
I was going to say Florida because he's got to help Jedd Fisch when he's hired there in a couple of years.
How about Manny? Be like, when I talked to him last, just dropping names. I'm a reporter. I'm out in the field.
I did talk to him in August. You were there. I sent you the photos.
Yeah.
Tony Yayo has been asking the entire night if we could talk about Colorado's class. I think that Grace can cook. Go ahead, Grace. I want to ride the wave.
It just makes no sense. What were you doing? While everyone else was out recruiting,
not hopping on planes, right?
What are you doing? I mean, I don't know. It's just
what are you doing?
How many players do basketball teams sign? Do they sign more than 5 kids?
They sign 5 or 6. 8. Yeah.
I mean,
big classes could be 7, right?
Right.
Yeah, even more now because there's so many defections there. Obviously, they signed a transfer class. They're going heavy in the portal again, but I think we can make a case that DJ Lagway to Florida and then Seton possibly to Colorado are the two most important recruits in the country as far as need.
Can I try to clear this up just a little bit? Let me just try to clear it up.
Please.
I think that Colorado's plan was to have a light class, but by light, I think they wanted 10 or 12.
That's
right.
I would think so.
And then they would build heavily through the portal in order to fill out their roster.
Because you can't run off as many in year 2. Like the rules don't allow you to.
But
right?
I think it went off the rails and they accidentally ended up with 5. Like I think that is how it happened. Because one kid that didn't qualify academically, I believe, signed somewhere else.
Yes.
There's a few other, flips that were kind of bizarre. One kid flipped to Georgia Tech. We don't know the actual stories because, as Dion said, we're not in the house. But let me tell you, the curb appeal is not good right now. And I don't even know if I want to go in the house. I just don't know why, if they were intentionally going to sign 7 to 10, because they're going to go heavy in the transfer portal. Kelvin Harris here in the chat, Colorado people always say that. I understand that, but could you imagine Deion Sanders with an entire year to build a high school class, having only needing to fill 7 spots, how good that class should have and could have been based on what we know about him? And now they have one top 100 player, I think, if he signed today, and now their crown jewel, a 5-star offensive tackle that they somehow got to commit on national television 2 weeks ago, is going to Maryland? And I get it. Everybody has different thought processes about where they're from and being close to family. We talked about it with Jeremiah Smith. And I'm not here to look my nose down on anybody's college decision. But it's not like Alabama came in and swooped. So it's like, where was Deion in the high school ranks all year is something that I've written about extensively. People get mad at me when I write about it, but don't you think if I would have said, hey, Manny, Deion's going to sign 5 to 7 players in his first full cycle, how many top 100, top 200, even top 400 players would you think would be in that class? I think if you said top 400, I would have said 6 or 7 out of 7.
Right.
This is a disaster.
Yeah, this is.
What is that number?
I think it's 1.
It's just 1.
Seton still counts because he's in the class still, because he committed, but he hasn't signed yet. And my wrist hurts from scrolling back as far as I need to get to Colorado. They have 6 guys now, 1 5-star prospect who doesn't count, and they have 1 top 100 player. And that is what it is. So I have a friend who a friend of a friend who was on a private plane today.
Ooh, all right, Manny.
Jesus, Manny.
I've got my
if it is about Jeremiah Smith, you actually should pick up the phone.
I keep telling people text me, but
okay. So Ari has a friend of a friend
These are
who's
all
on a private
voicemails?
plane.
Voicemails?
These are all just phone calls. People are calling.
Who was on a JSX plane today, and I heard that Deion Sanders was on the plane from Denver to Dallas today. And it's like, I don't know why he would be doing that. Somebody inform me. It might just be an easy answer, but why aren't you in the bunker, man? Making moves. I don't know. Why are you having peanuts up 10,000 feet in the air? I just I'm with you, Grace. And what did you say? Coaching malpractice?
Recruiting
malpractice. We're gonna cut that, and we're gonna make that the promo of the show. We're gonna put it on Twitter. It's gonna be Grace Raynor, Colorado recruit. That's what they do to me every episode. It's your turn, Grace.
You don't believe?
I got an update.
Do you believe?
Our former producer and Hurricane loyalist, Mike Zimmerman, just slacked me and said that he is not the one calling you with updates on Jeremiah. So,
dude, he's
Zimmerman working the NIL. Mike's working the NIL.
I love Mike. He's so great.
Big Hurricane guy, and he's having a hell of a day. So,
yeah. All right, let's talk about a couple schools that we usually talk about in recruiting podcasts, but had kind of boring days, like Texas and Oklahoma, 2 teams going to the SEC. Both top 10 classes. I think Texas number 5 right now, 3rd straight top 5 class. Oklahoma number 8 after a number 5 class, or number 4 last year. Guys, I throw it out to you. Other than maybe the slight Ryan Wingo drama that really wasn't drama, I don't think
he was sleeping.
Yeah, I don't think those 2 schools, we thought about them today, which is probably a good thing.
I thought about Texas today.
Well, you think about Texas every day.
somebody accused me on Twitter today of being upset that Texas was good this year, and I was like, I got
I
a
know.
20 to 1
Do they listen?
here,
Do they listen to your podcast?
I'm sitting on 20 grand here. I mean,
You've
hopefully.
dedicated your life to this.
No, Texas
Oh.
had a great cycle, and they had some flips that being able to hold on to a kid like Wingo is certainly doesn't really count as a commitment on the day of, but it's certainly a recruiting win. You know, and I'm looking at the team rankings right now. Texas is number 5, checks in, and they are one of a few teams, I think 2 teams, that has 4 5-star prospects committed. And if Ohio State loses Jeremiah Smith, it'll be the most that anybody has. So, you know, I thought that there was a little bit of a weirdness to their Texas State stuff, because it's like, we did talk about Georgia and how they signed a top 5 class without really taking advantage of the state that they're in. And it's like, if you go look at the state of Texas, Texas didn't dominate by any stretch of the imagination. They only have 3 of the top 10 players, and 3 of, the top 30 players, went to Texas. But those players are Kobe Black, top 50, Xavier Filsame, 5-star safety that they flipped away from, you guessed it, Florida earlier in the week, and Colin Simmons, who's a top 15 player at the defensive end position. So they signed a top 3 class without dominating their own state too, which I think I may write that down. I'm gonna put that
Yeah. Grace, you is this what you expected from your buddy Brent Venables when he became a head coach? Like just top 5, top 10 classes? You were around him at Clemson.
I always thought Brent was a really good recruiter at Clemson. Like, probably didn't get as much credit as he deserved, but it does not surprise me that he is doing well at Oklahoma on the recruiting trail.
Manny looks like he's making moves there.
He does. You look like you're like
I'm doing my best Schefter for you guys right now.
Yeah, go ahead. You need to report something live. Go ahead, do it. So
if you do your John Clayton, you can ask for your mom for the what did you do?
Meatloaf.
Yeah.
Mom, meatloaf.
Was he asking for meatloaf? That's from the movie Wedding Crashers.
Yeah, that's what
you guys know where Meatloaf played college football, right?
No.
What's
you know
Meatloaf?
this? Meatloaf the singer?
Buddy, I've never even heard of that human.
You don't know who Meatloaf is?
I know that my wife gets it from the store pre-made for me once a month.
Grace, do you know who Meatloaf is?
No.
You've never heard of the singer Meatloaf? Yes, I have.
He's very popular.
Think for Love, right?
Yeah,
Sing it.
Yeah, just
is he better or worse than Jelly Roll?
Well, he was did you know, Manny? He was a defensive back at Texas Tech.
Defensive back? I thought you were going to say defensive lineman.
Yeah, well, that's one of those things that I've found out. Hopefully, it's still true. But you youngsters on this. Although Grace is 30 now, we've confirmed that Grace is 30. I knew her for like 3 years, and she was 29 for 3 years. So, welcome to the 30s. So, another school in the state of Texas is SMU, not headed to the SEC like Oklahoma and Texas, but the Mustangs are on their way to a Power 5 conference. And Manny and I talked to head coach Rhett Lashlee, and that's Manny's old buddy from the University of Miami days. Rhett was down there for a couple of years. So here's part of that conversation on the live stream, just like the other 2 interviews on the podcast tomorrow. Here's the entire interview with Coach Rhett Lashlee at SMU. Early in this whole evolution of your program, but how much has the move to the ACC or the announced move to the ACC affected your sales pitch in the recruiting trail?
It's been a huge boost for us. For probably the last 4 or 5 years here, the program we've been winning, going to bowl games, recruited well, but really kind of the last thing we needed to be able to really compete for the best players, specifically in Dallas and in the state of Texas, was to be in a power conference. That was just that last thing. You'd always get to the end of the final 3 or 4 with a kid and, Coach, I love it. I want to come to SMU. I want to be in Dallas, but I also want to play at the highest level on the biggest stage. And, we can only do so much with that. And so, going to the ACC is a big deal. I think it's a great fit for our school. Just in the short time, we had 2 kids committed in our 25 class before the announcement, but since the announcement, we've had 3 or 4 more. And I think a lot of websites were top 10 now in the 25 class, just because the caliber of kids that have committed that are now attracted to SMU has just changed, because they've always really wanted to come here lately and it's been attractive, but they wanted to play against the best of the best, and now they feel like they can.
Coach, you guys, I mean, obviously roster building nowadays is totally different with the transfer portal. And these first 2 years, as you've been sort of implementing your program, you've relied on the portal quite a bit. I think 26 transfers last cycle. A bunch of those guys started for you, were big-time contributors. I think you had 15 or 16 high school kids. But the first 2 years, kind of transfer portal heavy. Now that you're going to the ACC, how do you sort of do the math in your head? Do you start to favor more of the high school kids going forward, or is there even a perfect formula to sort of solving all this?
It's a great question. I don't know if there's a perfect formula for anything in college football right now. You're kind of trying to still have your mind on the future, but you're always trying to build the best team you can for this year. And with the way the rules are right now. And so, we still want to do both. We want to sign high school kids. We're in a state with great high school football and great high school talent. And really the Dallas Metroplex year in, year out has arguably the most Division I players signed. So that's not going to change. I think this cycle, last cycle, we had to go real transfer heavy, specifically on defense, to try to get ourselves where we felt like we could win a championship. And, fortunately it worked. I think this cycle, we'll still sign 10 or 12 high school kids. We'll probably still be a little bit transfer heavy. And then I think you could see it balance out a little bit more and then be more year to year, just because I think now being in the ACC, the caliber of player we can attract out of high school is different than it was. And so now we're feeling like we can get players that we can develop, compete with out of the high school ranks, as opposed to, well, do we want to try to get a better player out of the portal as opposed to settling in the high school world? And so I think it'll be different every year. I really don't know. I don't know if we'll have to be as transfer heavy every year. You'd like to get where you have a base of high school and then you use the portal to kind of supplement your roster year in, year out. And hopefully we can get to that point.
Yeah, a lot. All right, good stuff from Rhett Lashlee there. And Manny and Rhett were talking shop afterwards. Old quarterback buddies talking QBs.
My favorite thing about Rhett Lashlee is that he studied the entire history of Miami football during COVID when he was their offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I read about that in some guy's story. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, we got to wrap it up in a few minutes here. I'm going to read off the top 10 classes as of now. Things could change, and open the floor about a minute. Each of you guys pick a class, just something that jumps out at you, about a minute each, and then we'll wrap it up. So obviously, number 1, Georgia Bulldogs. Number 2, Alabama. Number 3, Miami for now. Number 4, Ohio State for now. Number 5, Texas. 6, Oregon. 7, Auburn. 8, Oklahoma. 9, Florida State. 10, Notre Dame. And I'm going to start with Ari and I'm assigning you the Auburn Tigers. You don't get to pick your own team.
I actually did a little quick.
I know.
I'm like so conflicted because I want to talk about Auburn, I want to talk about Oregon, and I want to mention that USC is a dumpster fire too.
This
I don't know
what to do. Pod, though. We got to show.
I know. Okay, Oregon has to be mentioned, and then just give me a minute and 15 seconds. They did a very good job today. They got Dante Moore in the portal last week, and then they flipped Jeremiah McClellan. They have another top 6 class. We got through the entire podcast. We did not mention Oregon. There will certainly be more time as Stars Matter continues on to the future to get to it. Oregon and Dan Lanning get it. They're the SEC, now in the Big Ten. I love what they're building. I love Dan Lanning. I love their NIL. A lot to like about Oregon. Auburn's just a team now that is involved again. Like for the Brian Harsin era, they weren't even trying. And for them to sign a top 7 class, I made the comment here. They only went up 11 spots in the rankings from 18 to 7, but that is a huge 11 spots. That's not just like 11 spots from 57 to 46. Like you're jumping over high quality teams in order to arrive in the top 10. And when you do that, you're also hopping over, programs that have status that might be bigger than yours. I mean, the teams that they have hopped over from 18 is USC, A&M, Florida, Michigan, Penn State, Tennessee, Clemson, LSU, Notre Dame, Florida State, Oklahoma. Auburn signed a better class than all of them. 2 years ago, they weren't even in top 5s with in-state players in the top 100. Say what you want about Hugh Freeze. They have done a pretty good job of reasserting themselves as a real good cycle for Freeze.
Grace, pick a team.
I feel like Notre Dame quietly had a really great year. Like after CJ Carr committed to them, I feel like we didn't talk a ton about them, but you look at them now, top 10, they have 4 top 50 players. They got the best player in Michigan in CJ Carr. This just feels like one of those classes that we didn't talk a ton about, but are going to look back on later and be like, that was pretty impressive.
Especially if CJ Carr's good. And I saw his he's already there working bowl practice. His parents bought a house near campus, so I hope he doesn't transfer after a year. So, Manny, if you're still with us, pick a class. You can't pick Miami.
All I'm going to say about Miami, really quick, if I can get this in, is that this is the first time since Larry Coker was coach in 2005 that they've had back-to-back top 10 recruiting classes. So kudos for Mario for finally kind of putting an end to that. I was going to talk about Alabama because I don't know how much we really spent talking about Bama, but number 2 class, Nick Saban hasn't lost it, right? I mean, I think people this season were predicting a 3-loss season, right, for Bama. Not only did they avoid that, but they ended up with getting into the playoff, having the number 2 signing class. And I'll say this, I saw Julian saying back in February, March when he was playing for the South Florida Express. I think he's going to be the best quarterback. I know he's ranked number 1 by the 247 Sports Composite, but I think he's going to be a Heisman Trophy winner at Alabama.
Ooh, I like it. Ooh, bold. All right, we are eschewing the trivia for the week because Grace is very excited. Although it would have been much better to put Grace on the spot on a live feed. I don't know, Manny.
I was trying to find my phone so I could call Manny before we hung up, but I can't find it.
Sorry,
no trivia today. We will be back next Wednesday with our normal show. We'll be in the feed Thursday. We'll record Wednesday. I don't know if you guys are on. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to be here next Wednesday.
Where are you going to be?
Manny, I'm going to be in suburban Battle Creek, Michigan at the in-laws, I think. Okay. I might be driving home. We'll need to figure this out. Manny might have to. Oh, before we leave, last week I'm in New York at an editors meeting. Thursday I'm going for a run in Central Park. Great weather. I put on Stars Matter to listen to my friends, and the first thing I hear is Manny talk about the best Mitch at the Athletic, Mitch Sherman. I expect that crap from Ari, Manny, not from you. Okay. Is Ari writing your jokes nowadays?
He is. But I had to try to make Mitch Sherman feel really good, and I thought this is the cheapest, easiest way to do it. Just call him the best Mitch.
The right way. I think it's time to get out of here.
Wait, Ari, do you have an HR? Do you have an HR one?
No, actually, for the first time in my time at the Athletic, HR is not on my back. So it's good.
All right.
Word slips happen. It's no big deal.
Yeah. Ari, would you like to do your?
Thank you guys for listening to the latest edition of Until Saturday Stars Matter edition. Is that how you say it? Stars Matter. It's been a long day. I've been laying on my stomach since 6 a.m. on my bed, and I'm just like, we're not gonna go like sit next to my wife and have a human interaction.
What is
but
this?
I appreciate. I don't know, man. Ask Manny what it is. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you guys next week. Even if Mitch isn't here, we'll get the best Mitch on the show, and we'll rock.
So funny, Grace.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate you. We'll catch you next week.